So we are live. How are you doing today?
Just after sitting in traffic for an hour to go 6 miles,
Yeah,
that was pretty.
an hour, 6 miles.
I know, and I grew up in LA, so like I remember this, and so but it was hilarious to have my husband, who was born and raised in Tucson, in Arizona, where there's very little traffic.
That's a small town, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I've been trying to convince him to move back, and we get in the car, and at whatever 11 a.m. it was 28 minutes. We get in the car at 5:30, and it's an hour and 17 minutes.
Yeah.
He just turns slowly and looks at me, and I was like, we'll be fine.
We'll be fine.
We'll make it.
The LA traffic nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah. And how's your 2024 been so far?
It's been amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's really been awesome. So we had
Let me just help you out here. There we go.
we had a baby,
Oh, congratulations.
I know, on the 28th of December.
Oh,
Came home from the hospital on New Year's Eve, and then 4 days later took off on a plane to come here and do house hunting.
oh wow.
So
Oh, so you're relocating to LA. That's part of it.
yes, we came out to kind of look at a couple houses this past week, and we ended up buying one right outside of Orange County.
Congratulations. That's exciting. That's a lot of change.
Totally unexpected.
Okay.
We were not thinking we were going to buy anything until like the summer. But, here we are, found the right house. And so now I'm dragging the desert kid from Virginia back to my home area. So, yeah, I get home field advantage.
That's great. Is you find LA is definitely like a better place to be work-wise and networking-wise than the East Coast or wherever else you've lived? I mean, this is kind of a hot spot, isn't it?
Yeah, I travel so much for work that I'm just so blessed that I get to choose. Like, that's such a privilege that I get to choose where I live. And I am the quintessential Southern Californian. Like, from surfing to the amount of times I use dude in a sentence,
Yes.
to all of it. And I'm an only child. And so my parents, right now, they live next door to us. We bought the house next door in Virginia, and they live next door. And so I was like, if I'm going to move home, I need a situation where I can bring them with me. And we found that situation, and I have an amazing spouse that supports me. So is it better for work? No, not necessarily. I think you live in an environment, or you put yourself in a community that supports your energy and that you can thrive in. And for me, being in Southern California is that. And it's probably just going to be for the next couple of years. And we have our eyes on something a little bit more tropical, like moving to Puerto Rico or possibly Portugal.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah. And we're not selling the places in Virginia. So we're going to be able to choose. Like, I'm still going to be a Virginia resident.
Okay.
We're going to have the house in California. And again, I understand how much of a privilege that is to be able to provide that for my family and be able to take advantage of that. I just truly think for my daughters, who are almost 13 and 7, to be able to live in a space that's just this melting pot of culture and people and beliefs is going to be really great for them. And they already spend so much time in California anyway, because my family still lives here. My uncles and cousins and all of that. And so to have them be closer to family, keep their grandparents around. And as I told my almost 13-year-old, which is a horrible time to move. Can we just identify that and admit that?
Terrible. Teenagers, it's awful. New schools, new friends,
Oh, yeah.
new relationships. It's all awful.
So I own all of that. So my only saving grace was Disney. I'm like, look, you get Disneyland. And she's like,
Is it Disneyland or Disney World in California? Which one is it? I always get confused.
do that to Californians. It's definitely land. And she loves it. So I told her, I was like, if you despise California, we can always go back to Virginia. But Virginia is very, very different.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's quiet.
Parts of it. You've also got DC, like right there.
Yeah.
So Northern Virginia is very animated and very opinionated and very power driven. And then you've got like almost the backwoods of country Virginia, where People don't just like, there's no, you ask for oat milk and they're like, what?
Yeah.
And, it's so, I guess it's isolated or
Provincial?
insulated.
Provincial, like kind of a little bit just kind of all wrapped up in their own worlds. Like no, people don't have passports, people don't travel internationally, people don't really care about anything outside of their, local districts or local communities, which is, I actually like that part of the United States. Like I've lived abroad for 25 years. So I was in Shanghai for 18 or 19 years in China, and then I was in Dubai, and then I've just come back to LA. And I've noticed like there's really wonderful little pockets of just local people just going about their local lives, not caring about all the other things that the folks in California and New York have to care about.
For sure. It's not wrong.
No.
It's just when you're the unicorn in the herd of horses, like, it's sometimes an interesting experience to have, because you're constantly trying to explain when somebody's like, oh, what did you do today? And you're like, oh, well, I worked on a multi-million-dollar contract with this billion-dollar company. And they're just like, and it's a different lifestyle.
For sure.
And
absolutely. Yeah.
it's just like a different DNA. Being a third generation entrepreneur, I think that I move the needle forward on my goals constantly because that's my choice. It's not that I'm never satisfied. It's just that I enjoy it. I enjoy the chase. I enjoy the push. I enjoy, traveling and seeing the world and seeing different people. And so I don't think I would ever be satisfied just seeing the same street and town and city decade after decade. And we lived in a really small town when we were in China.
Whereabouts exactly?
So the biggest city is Dalian.
Yeah, in the Northeast. That's a very beautiful little town.
It's very busy.
Yep.
It's very big. It was occupied, I guess, by Russia or
Japan. Japan kind of took over all of northern China at one stage in the late 30s and 40s.
There's a huge Russian population.
Oh, massive. Yeah, northern China has a huge Korean population.
Yeah.
And there's still leftovers of Japanese and Russian. It's a very mixed bag. Yeah, it was really lovely up there.
And it's like the fashion capital as well, like in China. And
some people from Shanghai might take that with a grain of salt, but yeah, Dalian is very, very fashionable.
The fashion supplies.
Oh yeah, lots of manufacturing for sure. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's where we flew into, and then the next biggest city that was around us was Kaifuchu, and then we were in this tiny town called Jinshitan, and there's an amusement park that my husband and I did a stunt show at, and it's called Fashiwango and Discoveryland in English. For anybody who's like, Bunny's Chinese is awful, which it is.
The tones are hard. I mean, I lived there for 18 years and I still didn't get all the tones all the time.
No. However, my acupuncturist thinks it's very amusing when I say shay shay. So like, she thinks it's very cute. So I'm gonna keep going.
Very good.
And so we lived in this tiny little fishing village, and it was kind of like the opening scene of Beauty and the Beast. With the people coming out and like saying hello and all of that. I so enjoyed that for a year. It was so great to see that culture and experience that culture.
What years were you there?
2009, so right after the Olympics.
Okay, that's nice. That was like a time when everything kind of calmed down a little bit, because the build up to the Olympics was crazy.
Yeah. So it was really cool, and I'll never forget, like, walking through the village. I had a migraine. Like, I have migraines, and I was starting to get the auras and the migraine. This little Chinese woman like comes out of her somewhere, wasn't even her house, and like grabs me and takes me home with her. Like, and I'm a 6'3", very white looking person.
Yes.
With currently turquoise hair.
You would stand out in China.
Oh, I
guaranteed.
I did, most definitely. And so she grabs me, takes me home with her, makes me drink these awful herbs, and like rubs this stuff that I felt like it was going to burn my skin off on the back of my neck and on my temples, which just made my eyes water. And in about 20 minutes, I felt better.
Yeah.
No more migraine.
Traditional Chinese medicine.
She kicked me out of the house. I had no idea where I was. And then it happened one other time where I had a headache walking through the town, wasn't even thinking about it, and she scooped me up. I had no idea where her house was. So the third time, I have a heart condition. The third time I was having some heart issues, and I intentionally wandered into town to try to be found by her. And my husband was like, well, don't you know where she lives? And I'm like, no, the 2 times I was there, I had this massive blinding headache. I have no idea where she was. And I'm so grateful for that experience because when I came home, I started working with an acupuncturist and an herbalist. And without that experience, I don't think I would have been really aware of the power of Eastern medicine.
Sure.
And I want a little bit of that diversified experience for my kids as well.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. Yeah, a lot of my friends in Shanghai way back in the day, they were actually studying traditional Chinese medicine, and that was something they did. Like, I had some friends that taught English, and then on the side, they were also like studying traditional Chinese medicine because they wanted to go back and, you know, bring medical alternatives to the Western world, you know, which were heavily pharmaceutical dependent, right? So it's you know, I guess having some choice is always helpful.
Yeah, and having the experience of like a different healing avenue, you know, outside of Western, outside of doctors, because it was very much not something that I had been exposed to. And just trust. Like, I remember telling my mom what had happened. She's like, somebody took you into their house? Like, yes. Like, and it wasn't alarming, you know? And
For her, it was just like a normal day on this, you know, just picking up a friend on the street and inviting them back for some tea and some herbal medicine.
That was horrible.
Yes.
It was terrible. It was like leaves and bark.
Yeah, that's exactly what
worked.
it is. Yeah. Fermented maybe also.
Yes. And we were doing some like fertility stuff the past couple years before we had our son. And my herbalist gave me this horrible tea again. And I think had I not had the experience of living in China and that experience with Eastern medicine, like I would have given up on it. And I was like, no, I will suffer through this. And obviously we have a son, so there's something to be said about it.
Ride it out, and you
like get stabbed with needles and cupping and the whole thing.
Oh, the cupping's nice, where they light the match inside, and then they hook it, and then it sucks your skin up, and it's supposed to like pull out all of the evil chi and all this evil, you know, energy inside you.
Well, even from a Western perspective, it creates bruising, which brings, you know, attention to that area of the body for healing.
For the white blood cells and stuff like that.
So you've got all these white blood cells that are flooding that part of the body. And so East and West, always. Yes,
it works.
Yeah, always.
So one of the reasons why I really wanted to chat with you is because you're a third generation entrepreneur and you deal a lot with work-life balance. And I just feel like, before 2019, this was all over the map, like just crazy chaos. Like people were working way too much and not having any balance. And then COVID hit, and then everyone's got this like hybrid work from home thing. And I would just love to hear your story of like where you grew up and how you even contemplated getting into this space. So where are you from originally? Other than in California, you mentioned, but where exactly?
Yeah, about 45 minutes north. Well, not even that, 30 minutes north.
Depends on the time of day.
Yeah, well, right now it'd be like 2 hours. A place called Westlake, Thousand Oaks. Yep. So it's right on the other side of Malibu. Like Malibu's on one side of the mountain and hill, and Thousand Oaks and Westlake are on the other.
It's a beautiful area. Like I have a lot of friends that live there. Great for families and children. Yeah, like half of the Hollywood producers and directors and friends that I have all live in Westlake. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Westlake, and it's crazy because it's right next door to Calabasas, which is where I used to always ride my horses, and now everybody knows Calabasas for the Kardashians. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I rode my horses through like where their houses are now.
They probably bought up the horse tracks and just built mega mansions.
Well, one of my friends goes, do you know Britney Spears has a house in Thousand Oaks? And I was like, why? It's an amazing place to live.
It's close to Van Nuys, so if you have a private jet, if you're 10 minutes from Van Nuys, so if you have a private jet life,
this is mind blowing. Yeah. It's mind blowing when you've grown up there.
Yeah,
because it's a sleepy little town.
It is,
and so, but it is very close to LA, and so my parents had their company. My grandfather still has his company. He's passed away, but my uncles run it. So I grew up in business, and I told my mom. I remember telling my mom, being the smart teenager that I was, the only thing I will never be is an entrepreneur. Like, I'm going to prove you wrong. Not that my parents ever made me feel like I had to take over their company. We never even had a conversation about it. None of that. The plan was for me to go to college, which I did. And
Where'd you go, if you don't mind me asking?
U of A,
Okay.
which is also like UC Tucson at this point. It's like 50-60% Californians and then 30% people from Chicago.
It does have a reputation of being like a pretty party school, doesn't it? Like it's a pretty
Arizona State.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Arizona State.
Yeah, ASU. We don't discuss ASU. So you can go to ASU if you want undergraduate and partying. If you want a real education. So.
I just thought all of Arizona was a party destination.
I'm going to plead the fifth on what my activities were at University of Arizona.
Yeah.
However, I got a great education, and then I got my master's degree at Prescott College, which is in northern Arizona. And I remember when I was 17, there's 1 million swimming pools at people's houses in Tucson. And they had these swimming schools that you would take the kids to the outdoor school. And, there'd be water safety instructors there and all of that. But no one was going to schools, like to people's homes, and teaching the kids how to swim in their homes. And obviously that's going to be a premium service. And there were people that could afford it. And so I started doing it. And then I had this thing called college that got in the way. And I had a job that got in the way. And so I started hiring my friends. And, $75 for a swimming lesson, I'd give them $40 and I'd keep, 35. And fast forward to me having like a little bit over 70 people that from college and all of this that were helping me with this swimming company. And my mom goes, you have a company. And I'm like, no. This is just like the thing I'm doing on the side.
It's a side hustle.
Yeah, it was just whatever. It's just this thing. And so then there was a Native American reservation that needed water safety instructors. They needed lifeguards, and they needed all of this. And so I was like, well, I can lifeguard. I'll come, lifeguard. And then they were like, well, we need you to teach us. We need to have lifeguards taught. And so then I got my lifeguard instructor certification. And then that was like a whole nother part of the company. And so 2.5 years later, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I went to another swimming company. I sold my client base. I sold the equipment that I had, and I sold the contacts that I had as far as for like individuals that were currently working. And that was the first company I sold.
That's epic.
But I didn't realize it. Like I was still like, this is just a thing, right?
It's because we grew up in the Baywatch era.
Yeah.
Being a lifeguard is just kind of a thing, right? It wasn't like a job or a business. It was just kind of a lifestyle.
I mean, and being from Southern California, I'm like, you pay people to teach you how to swim in water? Like it,
I would just pay to hang out with David Hasselhoff.
I did not hang out with David Hasselhoff. I did have the red like bathing suit.
You have to have a red bathing suit, yeah. And the red buoy, yeah.
No, I don't think I had the red buoy. I think that's maybe like open water. Like, yeah, I had the red, like, not solid one, but it said like guard in white letters that I'd walk around with. I felt more like, what's the, from Sandlot, Wendy not Hasselhoff. See, now
it's in your
corn or
Wendy Peppercorn. I'm not familiar with this.
You're going to get a ton of comments on this podcast because people need to now correct me because I'm not going to Google it. So we're just going to leave it there.
We're going to leave it there.
So I ended up getting my master's degree. I did the stunt stuff with my husband in China. And
how did you go from doing a master's degree to going to China to do stunt stuff?
There's like not enough time on the podcast to like wind through all of that. I met my husband at a movie studio in Tucson, and he got an opportunity to go to China while we were dating. And he said, you can come with me, but they said we have to be married because it's a communist country and you can't come and work and live with me unless we're married, which to this day, I'm still not entirely sure was true or if he was just getting one over on me to get me to say yes to marry.
I think that makes sense though, like, because if you're going to get everything paid for and you're going to, get flights over and housing and stuff like that, you'd have to, they don't really do like domestic partnerships in China. you're either like married or you're not, right?
I'll take your word for it. I still think maybe he was just,
You use that as a way to goat you into getting married quickly.
yeah. Well, last week was 15 years, I think, that we've been married. So it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
That's no small task. 15
No.
years is congratulations.
Thank you. 15 years and 3 kids makes me feel very, very old. So
Accomplished,
seasoned.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. I'm like a general in the war of being in a relationship.
Maybe in life, I think. And in life, I think you've earned your stripes.
A general of stars.
Stars, exactly.
So that's how I ended up in China, is because he said, you can come with me. We have to be married. And
that was a 1-year contract in China, working at the Adventure Center,
Discovery Land.
And what were you guys exactly doing there? Because I'm super curious. Because I've been to lots of theme parks in China, and I worked for the New York Times covering China for like a decade, from 2001.
Show.
I would have if I'd known. I mean, I was still there in 2009 working for the New York Times because I was there right through the build-up to the Olympics and then the Shanghai Expo and everything after that. And I didn't leave till 2019.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the stunt show was like a Bonnie and Clyde stunt show. So it was a live action show, very similar to anybody who's seen Waterworld at Universal Studios.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I've seen that.
So it was very similar to that. No water, though. So there's that. A little different. And I played the Bonnie character, Samantha Sheridan. And my husband played the like Brad Pitt police officer character. And it was Brad Hammer. That's who he was. So we spent our first year of marriage with him shooting at me and me setting him on fire, hitting him with a car. And I actually, in the show, like blew up a helicopter to try to kill him and kissing another man because I was Bonnie and there was a Clyde.
Yeah.
And
all in character.
I suffered through it. And I did a 40-foot Aussie rappel, which is a face-first rappel. I think you're familiar with.
A little bit of climbing and stuff, but I didn't know what an Aussie rappel was. So you go head first.
Face first. Yeah.
That seems like the wrong way to go down a rope.
It was so fun.
It's like SWAT team style, right? Where they like hook their feet onto the thing and then they go down with the guns like this. I've seen it in a movie.
That's still like upside down. So I think that's an inverted rappel.
Yeah, inverted rappel,
Yeah, so I was not doing an inverted rappel in a giant red dress and heels.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess I could have, but I was doing a Aussie rappel, an Australian rappel, for those that are listening that are familiar with the rappel space, and I loved it. And it's ironic because my husband's terrified to do it, but he loves high falls, and I don't love high falls. Like, you can set him on fire, and he'll do an amazing high fall. He is so talented and gifted at that. You give him a rappel, and he's like, I don't want to do this.
Wow. So yeah, just some things freak people out. You never know.
I'll do it. I'll go. He's like, I'd rather go fast down than slow. I'm like, I will lean precariously to my death and then run down the pillar. That sounds great. Well, you've seen a descender in movies, right? Where like they're running down the side of a building.
Yes, I've seen that.
That's a descender. So instead of having the rope, because at a certain length, a rope is too taut to actually rappel. And so they use a descender. And so it's just the same thought process. It's hooked to your back. And there's a cable that is slowly giving you slack so that you can run down.
All I'm visualizing right now is like every Tom Cruise movie I've ever seen.
Yes, pretty much. I'm not Tom Cruise, but, he can call and I'll do an Aussie rappel or a descender stunt. That's like the only thing I'm probably licensed to do other than equine stunts at this point. So that's what I did. And it was a great experience. And for a long time, my husband was trying to talk me into doing a marriage retreat that was like a stunt marriage retreat, because he said it's so therapeutic to, for couples to be able to light each other on fire and do stunts. And I was like, I agree with you, but I don't want the liability.
Did you never pursued that option?
I don't even want to know what the insurance would be.
Yeah.
And it would be fun, but no. I also, being a therapist, marriage therapy was not my favorite. So you're going to have a 50% fail rate anyway. So I was like, I don't want to do that.
Did you do your master's degree in
counseling and psychology?
Okay.
Yeah. Which is partially probably because I was married to a stuntman. So
you would need to be able to assess your own feelings and emotions about all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. And the finish of the entrepreneur story is that no matter what job I took, I found myself trying to improve the efficiency and the operations of the company. And what I had learned was that they didn't teach you business in getting a master's degree, but I was really successful in the therapeutic business. And I ended up having a private practice and doing $300K in my first year. And the people that I went to school with were like, what are you doing? Teach me how to do this. And was like, well, how do you not know this? And that's where my mom stepped in and was like, you grew up in business. Other people didn't. And so where you have this natural ability to optimize operations and admin and prioritize and P&Ls and balance sheets and finances, taxes, all this stuff. That's just the way my brain worked.
Was that like, because my family were kind of entrepreneurial and in business as well, and I just remember like being a kid sitting at the dining room table listening to my parents talk business all the time, and at the time I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Like, let's talk about my day, right? Because you're a kid and lots of things are happening, but no one cares. But then, I think you do absorb a lot of what's going on around you, right? And I think that you carry that on through your career, and that's how you build out these entrepreneurial experiences.
Yeah. I did. My childhood was a lot of listening to my mom's customer service, and I never wanted to come home from school because I was really fortunate in the aspect that my mom moved the home office out of our home, and they bought a warehouse and moved the office into that building. That also meant that if I was sick, I was going to the warehouse and I was going to lay on the couch, this brown corduroy couch, and listen to more customer service calls and scheduling and all of this kind of stuff. And if I didn't have anything to do, then I was going to be filing. And I did not want to do that either.
Subconsciously just taking all of it in while sick on a couch.
And screaming and being like, I'm never going to do this. I'm going to go work for somebody else. And I started teaching people how to do business. And I found that I was not only really good at business, but I was really good at teaching people how to do business. And as a therapist, 80% of my clients were coming in for burnout and overwhelm because of their jobs. And I was like, well, let me go to the jobs. Let me go be a therapist for the businesses and for the workplaces so that then it would be more efficient for me to create better workplaces than it is for me to just try to, after the fact, heal the therapeutic mental health of each and every employee.
Which would be, you're going upstream, right? You're trying to deal with the problem.
Of course, because I'm an entrepreneur. And so I'm like, there's a more efficient way to do this, right? It's like one of those Instagram things. It's like, I'm an entrepreneur, so of course I'm going to try to fix the world. So I started working with organizations, and very quickly I had clients that were multi-billion-dollar companies, and I was burning out as a therapist. And so I went to my supervisor who had helped me get my hours, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a therapist. I don't want to sit in an office and listen to somebody complain, but not actually be able to help them take action in order to make their lives better.
That the taking action point is really important, because if you're just talking all the time and nothing's happening and you can't really action any of this advice or actually actively change your lifestyle or your routine, then nothing changes and you're just talking. It's got to be really frustrating.
And that's when people ask me what's the difference between a therapist and a coach, that's the biggest difference.
What a coach will make you actually change your lifestyle and change the patterns and routines.
A coach is accountability and action, and a therapist is talk.
Oh, that's a nice way to say it. I haven't heard it described like that before.
We can give homework as a therapist, but there's almost no communication in between sessions, and we're limited to the therapy box.
Right.
So we're dealing with the diagnosis. We're not able to really work with you outside of that. So there's some behavioral stuff that we can do, but talk therapy is just so inefficient. And for everybody listening, like, if there's one thing that I don't like, it's inefficiency. And so I ended up saying I didn't want to do this. And she's like, well, she happened to be married to, of all things, a world-renowned brain surgeon. And he wanted to study the neuroscience of trauma with equine therapy.
With horses. That's fantastic.
And at first I was like, how do the horses let me know how their day's going and what trauma? He's like, no, that's not we're not being a therapist with the horses. Equine therapy is using horses in therapy with humans.
I've been on some horses that could have used some trauma therapy probably because they bucked me. I had a few tough horse experiences out there.
I guarantee you, as operator error. So
Definitely 100%. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing.
So he had this awesome opportunity to be able to study the brain with equine therapy and prove that it actually was effective. And so my supervisor at the time, Dr. Jane Hamilton, she's like, I don't really like horses. You do. And, Dr. Alan Hamilton needed a therapist. And so I got the opportunity to start working with him. And the programs that we developed and I truly believe the work that we did is like just profound. And so I was like, I really do like this. And from that, I made connections that there were executives from larger companies that had come and done this experience, and I had met them, and they were like, we want somebody who has done this experience with us at the ranch to do it with our teams. I'm like, you want to bring your team to therapy? This is weird. But that was my first introduction to organizational psychology. And then from there, they were like, we want somebody who did the team experience to come back with us and help us actually implement and hold us accountable to the communication, positive leadership that we discussed during the equine retreat, which started as equine therapy. And so when people ask me, like, how did you get all these opportunities to speak on stages and keynotes and all this? I mean, it really did start at the ranch. It was a relationship currency moment that drug me into organizational psychology and drug me into working in workplace alignment and workplace burnout prevention and psychological safety. And ironically, I got burnout on that because that's a lot of travel and that's a lot of glass buildings and hotel rooms. And I said, I really do want to actually help people that are like my parents. So I started a Better Place Consulting and grew that with corporate consulting. And we still do a lot of corporate consulting, and I still go in and do speak for corporations. But we have consultants that do the majority of the groundwork there. And then I started in a Better Place Consulting, the entrepreneurial work-life alignment. And so how do you build a business that supports your life? Because so many entrepreneurs start a business to be able to have the freedom of time and money and energy. And then they end up working more than they did in corporate. And
often for less money.
Yes, because they have a employee mindset. I have the benefit of having grown up in a business that my parents designed around this family concept. And so I saw it in action. I knew it was possible. And now I have 5 companies. And over the past 15 years, I've done 14 companies of my own, not to mention hundreds of my clients. And so it's like there are a billion ways to grow a company. Why would you pick one that is trading time for money? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't see themselves and their own time as being quantifiably. I don't think they understand the monetary value of their own time. A lot of entrepreneurs, because they think like, if I can do this, then I don't have to hire staff to do it. So they end up working like 20 hours, a day to get something off the ground. Whereas if you hire people and treat them well and train them well, you can get much further, much faster. Okay, well, let's land that for your listeners. So they spend an hour and 24 minutes, however long this episode goes, listening to this episode. So that's an hour and 24 minutes of their life. If they go out from this episode and they make a choice that generates $100,000, that's $100,000 return on investment for an hour and 24 minutes. That's not how it works. It's about the outcome, not about the time. So that's the thinking. It's like, what outcome are you delivering? And then how can you deliver it when you're not there? And this is for service-based entrepreneurship. I want to be clear on that, because product-based entrepreneurship is a little bit different. But for service-based entrepreneurship, it's like, if this conversation helps and we go and have this conversation again next week, that's not efficient. But if we have this conversation, we record it, and then we monetize that conversation, such as in courses or a private podcast stream or something like that, not only can we reach millions of people that will be able to be helped in this hour and 24-minute example, but we're also able to do something once for an hour and 24 minutes and monetize it repeatedly after that.
Sure.
So the kind of businesses that I'm helping clients make are capitalizing and maximizing on income and impact.
And they're mainly in the service space.
Most of them are in the service space. So coaches, realtors, accountants. So a lot of therapists, a lot of the industries that you would typically be trading time for money.
Right, which is a death sentence.
Well, so you had asked about COVID, and this is one of the blessings, I guess, that came out of COVID was, how do I reach millions of people? And prior to COVID, it was very much I travel and I see people face to face and we have this conversation and all of this, or I have to have a storefront. And we saw how fragile that can be.
Yeah.
And
the F&B industry, for example, completely destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so being able to see how you can have the same outcome on somebody's life and same impact on somebody's life or a similar impact on somebody's life, but do it in a way that you don't have to be there in person, and now do it in a way that you don't have to even be there live. And when you can scale it that way, you also can make it more accessible. To fly me out to California to record this podcast, and if I hadn't already been in California, that would have been an investment, right? And so now it's like, if we did this virtually, would the product be similar? The story, the audio would be similar, and you get to still bring it to millions of people if you desire.
That's true. Yeah, a lot of people are doing podcasts remotely these days via Zoom and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so we got to figure out how to stop believing and limiting ourselves to it's only valuable if I'm there in person.
Okay.
And live.
So that's been a huge push for your business and your consulting, is getting people to make that switch.
Yeah. Instead of trading time for money, looking at it as being able to trade value. But that's really what life is. It's an exchange of value. And so money is just the paper version of that value.
Right, because originally it was time, or you would work for someone else. You would barter, right? You would use
shells, or and you think about that, and it's like, if I trade you a shell and you give me an apple, well, you spent time and energy and money, presumably, well, even before they existed to money, time and energy growing an apple tree, and I spent time and energy bringing you a shell.
Sure.
And why did you want the shell? Well, maybe you live somewhere where it would take you a lot of time to go then and find a shell.
Sure. Yeah. You live by the sea. You found a seashell in 5 minutes. I live up on a mountain. I have an apple field. I grabbed an apple. We met somewhere in the middle and changed because it's too far for me to go to the ocean and too far for you to climb the mountain.
That's an exchange of value.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And how do you get your service people to buy into that or really understand that?
We have a process that we break down, like what they're currently doing and what they desire as far as their life. So what their business is currently doing and what they desire for their life, and how if they want to make 10 times more, they genuinely don't have the capacity to work 10 times more.
Because they think they have to do everything in person in the moment, and they don't have 240 hours per day, which should be 10 times. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like this, you haven't built a business, you built a job. And when they can see that no matter how hard they work, they're not going to be able to have that desired outcome that they want for their life, then there's this moment of surrender to another way.
Right.
And then we can build a company. A company is systems. And that is the true entrepreneur. Entrepreneur isn't working. An entrepreneur is creating systems.
That's interesting. I mean, I haven't heard anyone really explain it like that, like entrepreneurs who create a job for themselves versus who create like a company.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very interesting distinction that most people don't really get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of entrepreneurs take pride in calling themselves a CEO.
Of a one-person company.
Of a one-person company, but it really, even if you look at chief executive officer, would you want an entrepreneur should always be outside of that position and hire that position, because a CEO is typically not the visionary. And even in the companies where I know that the CEO is the visionary, an entrepreneur would get bored in that position.
Right. Or they're almost always the founders in that case, right? Where they founded it and then they've just wanted to keep control of the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're creating systems.
Mhm.
And so they typically are able to apply that. That's why there's so many serial entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneurs that, have the multi-comma club, for lack of a better term, have figured out that they're maximizing on implementing and growing and scaling the same systems in multiple companies to solve multiple different problems.
And not have to run 1,000 miles an hour
Yeah.
on their own.
I don't run my companies. I have an incredible team that is really good at that. I do own them at this point, though. And that to me is such a blessing, because people talk about, where should I invest my money?
Invest in yourself.
Yeah. And the personal development journey that I've been on really since becoming a therapist has been the greatest ROI. And then it's funny because you get this perspective where you look back and you're like, well, playing softball, I played softball for like 15 years. I had a coach, I practiced, I invested time, energy, and money, and I had this optimal outcome. Why wouldn't you do the same thing for your life?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like trying to go through life without a coach or a mentor or someone to kind of guide you along the way who's been through it before doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I just had a conversation this morning with a ex-Googler who is a client of mine. And she had said, I want somebody like you to partner with in my company. And I said, well, tell me more about that. And she was talking about my business experience. And I said, you're going to be more successful than I am. She's like, well, how do you know that? I said, because you invested to be able to start from where I'm at and build on that. So I get to save you from all of the mistakes and F-ups and learning curves that I've had in 15 years. I can't save you from all of them because I haven't made all of them. Luckily, there's still time. And I think that is one of the benefits of investing in mentorship and coaching, is because you get to start from where I am.
I think well-capitalized entrepreneurs definitely have, while they have the bank, the bank balance to seek out coaches and things like that. But I think maybe if you're a little bit more cash-strapped at the beginning, it might be a little bit harder to find like-minded mentors or people who can help guide you. I think and isn't that why people join these what am I trying to say? These these investment funds that help bring companies up to fruition, like Y Combinator and with stuff like this, where they help coach the executives and they help coach the founders and they teach them, how to do fundraising and how to open bank accounts and do marketing and all this kind of stuff, all within this ecosystem. And then they take a percentage of the company and help them kind of get to the next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are formalized. How about, SCORE is a nationwide business mentorship that offers free mentors.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Entrepreneurs. Yeah. And then there's also, typically you started your company because you were inspired by somebody.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Reach out to that person. And I believe that you should be investing something in the relationship. And so, the three resources that we have are time, energy, and money. And so if you're not going to pay that coach or that mentor money, figure out how you can still exchange value. Because that's the energetic rule and law of the world, is exchanging that value.
Yeah, if you don't exchange value, then the relationship has no legs.
And you don't really have the accountability to show up and do the work, because you have nothing to lose. So even when I'm working with an executive where, the company is footing the 6-figure bill for coaching, for executive coaching, I still make them put something on the line, time, energy, or money. Because otherwise they don't show up. That's when you get the email 30 minutes before the session. Oh, hey, I've got to bump this because it's just not important to them.
Sure. Yeah. Constant, just kind of pushing the buck.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like, if you are wanting to build a company more than anything else in the world, invest in yourself and find somebody who has already done what you want to do and work with them and establish that relationship. And I'm so fortunate that I had my parents and I had my grandfather to be able to model that for me. And as soon as I was humanly possible to do, I invested in my own coach. Before, I invested almost half of what my company was making in a coach.
Really? So what, 50% of your profits almost?
Like I guess it would be like 47%. I don't recommend it. And I don't recommend taking out a ton of debt. However, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I will never make an investment that I don't get an ROI on.
That's obviously, it's a lot of confidence to be able to have, to be able to allocate that kind of capital, knowing you're going to get some kind of return. I think where we are now, maybe after COVID, is it seems like everyone's kind of a coach and everyone is trying to help everyone do everything. Like, I make TV shows, for example, and I've had people write to me on social media saying, oh, I help mentor producers and stuff like that, or I can help you with a podcast, or, you do speaking events. So, I can mentor you and work with you on your speaking. And it just seems like since COVID, like I have been completely bombarded on every front by someone trying to help me do something. And instead of trying to take the time to figure out who's legit and who's not, I've almost just turned a blind eye, against the whole space because it's been too much.
Yeah. And you're going to find the right people. You're going to get a message that will align with you if that's what it's supposed to happen. We are in this era, the 100 Monkeys story?
I don't know the 100. Is it from China? They love monkeys.
More comments below this podcast. That's what we're going to...
Where is the 100 Monkeys story from? Yes.
Please let us know. It's this idea that at a certain point, the majority will teach the rest. And so in this example, and the 100 Monkeys story, I'm trying to remember the specifics of it. It's something around a banana. And the fact, I think it's something around the banana. We're going to Google it after this. Mm-hmm. But it's like one monkey learned the optimal way. We're just going to make this up. This is Bunny Young's monkey story. One monkey learned the optimal way to undo a banana. And then that monkey taught the second monkey, and that's now 2 monkeys, right? 98 of them are opening this banana inefficiently. I don't think this is the 100 Monkeys story exactly, but we're going to make it an inefficient story since that's clearly my brand.
This is your version.
So then the 2 teach 2 more. And then at some point we get over 50%. When you get to that over 50%, then 100 monkeys are now doing it the more efficient way. Mm-hmm. And so post-COVID, when you say that there is a movement for everybody becoming coaches, because everybody is stepping into their value, hopefully. Everybody is realizing that they have something to share in this world and that they can help others have a more successful life if they really are great coaches and they really are doing their own work and not just trying to get paid by somebody.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue because I actually go through the resume and stuff like that, and I look for stunt, Bonnie and Clyde China in every person I meet. And if they don't have that, I just delete or archive it and move on, right?
I'm there. And I'll be the first one to say I did not get a coaching certification until maybe like 2 years ago. And I've been coaching longer than the 15 years that I've been in entrepreneurship, if I'm really thinking about it. I thought coaches were bogus. I had a master's degree in therapy. And I was a therapist. Therapist, clearly in the hierarchy of life, is better than somebody who can just hang a shingle up and say, I'm a coach.
Yeah, fair enough.
What I learned, though, was that the power of coaching extends outside, for me, the box of therapy.
Yeah, it's strange because therapy has so many restrictions and regulations. Yes. And if you take yourself out of that ecosystem into coaching, if your coach is a therapist, then you would get very much similar treatment, but you would get it not 24/7, but you would have more access to help each other out without this guise of it being like a medical issue, which complicates everything.
So I don't do any therapy with my clients, and I do therapeutic work.
Okay. That makes sense because you're doing it. No, you're doing it through your coaching.
I can't help but bring any tools.
All of your life experience,
into being a coach. I can't help but do that. So you're getting the benefit of somebody who is trained as a therapist and in human psychology and human behavior and has signed paperwork and taken an oath to say, I'm not going to do anything unethical to you. Is that going to stop a therapist? Clearly it doesn't stop 100%. However, I think somebody who has dedicated 8 years of their lives in learning about human psychology and behavior and would have the integrity and ethics and morals to be able to be a professional. And so I'm dragging all of that into coaching.
And I think that's the most important thing. It's the degrees plus the life experience which makes you effective at what you do and helping. Because some people, they only have the paperwork and they haven't done, adventures through China, and they didn't grow up with entrepreneurial parents. So they're grasping at straws when it comes to all the things that you actually have solid memories of and can point to positive, reinforced actions that you've seen work previously.
Yes. And not only that is I have an understanding of the human brain and neuroscience. Like, there was a point in my life where I was like, okay, Stuntwoman, worked under a brain surgeon.
Stuntwoman's a good title, though, you have to admit.
It's amazing. I'm grateful for it. D1 athlete, Division I athlete.
That was the softball?
No, I wish I played softball at University of Arizona. It was volleyball.
Okay. Volleyball's great, too. I played basketball. Like, we were always close with the volleyball people. Yeah. Same gym, right? You always had to go in and out and catch up with them.
Yeah. We had a beautiful stadium or a beautiful arena that was built because or upgraded because the basketball team won the championship.
That's how it works.
Grateful to them.
Yeah.
And third generation entrepreneur, lifeguard, swim instructor. I'm like, who is going to hire me?
Yeah.
No one.
You got to create your own space.
So I did. And guess what? I used every single one of those things in my coaching and in my speaking. And I can't tell you how many times I'm invited on a podcast or to give a keynote because I was a Stuntwoman or because I'm a third generation entrepreneur. And like, owning that value that no one in the world has the same experience, wisdom, talent as you do. And stepping into that value and saying, okay, how can I use that to connect with people and share that value and exchange that value? And so while, yes, the coaching industry is exploding, we still don't have as many coaches as we have humans.
No, that's true.
And I think that we could all, as humans, use a little bit of coaching on how to be better humans.
That would be the first step beyond building great businesses, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think in order to build a great business, you really need to understand why you're building it. And not only do I have the foundation, like I look at business coaching and I look at business coaches, I'm like, you're missing it. And I had this conversation with a friend this morning because they're selling their business. And they said, well, my business coach said to not tell them how much money I want out of the deal because they could offer me something better. And I said, well, why do you want this amount of money? And they said, well, because X, Y, and Z. And I said, then tell them that. Because do you care about the money or do you care about getting this business and your clients in the hands of somebody who will take care of them so that you can move on to the next project? And that's the difference between a business coach and whatever kind of weird hybrid I am of a business therapist, life coach, business coach. It's like I can see the road to a business supporting your life. And it's not always about the money. And I made it about the money when I started business. And it was about, making as much money as I possibly could. And I don't think my family was going to care. I mean, I've flown my family first class and I've flown my family on Southwest. And my kids love the little yellow snacks.
On Southwest.
They'd rather have me there at their softball games as a coach, ironically, coaching my daughter's softball team, than me working till 10 o'clock at night every single night so that they can have more money. There's something more important in this world than money. Money is just value. And the most valuable thing in my life is my time with my family and my health and my mental health, physical health, spiritual health, all of that.
Yeah. And
so being able to help people see that building a successful business is not building a multi, seven-figure business all the time or building an empire. Like that actually ironically comes when you're building something that's aligned.
When you're building something you love to do. Yeah.
Like I just had this morning after having both the conversations that I've shared on this podcast, one with the ex-Googler and the other one about the sale of the business. I walked into the other room and I told my husband, I was like, effing, I don't know if we can.
You can cuss as much as you like.
Fucking love what I do. And I am really fucking good at it.
Yeah.
And that is a great feeling to have. We should not feel ashamed to have that feeling.
Agreed.
And so he looked at me and he's like, yeah, you are. But it's like, I don't need him to tell me that, to know that. And that makes me want to do it more. And it also makes me have this energy that is magnetic and attractive to my clients because I'm not sitting there waiting for them to tell me that I'm good enough.
Mm-hmm. And then they want to hire you more, and then you end up making more money, and you're helping them more, and you're doing better for yourself, and then your kids get to see you more, and it just all spins positivity.
Yes. And I get to create the program to help more people, which I've done so that I don't spend, every waking hour trying to do this and being exhausted. I mean, right now I have an 8-week-old sitting in the car with my husband waiting for me to finish the podcast and come back out. And so like this time with you is high value to me because
very high value for me also. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so I'm doing it because I want to make sure that this value gets out to your audience and to the masses. And I want to make sure that I'm not delivering, a crap message. So I'm sharing my experience so that people can know like this is your experience as well if you have it, to step into your value. And that I get to walk 100 feet and be right back with my family and enjoy the rest of our time in SoCal. Like that's what's important to me. That's why I built a business, not to work all the time.
Yeah. How many of your clients would you say you deal directly with, and how many clients would you say that you have hired staff to deal with directly? Like I'm curious, like where, like do you deal with 50% of your clients directly and then or you just deal with none, or how does that hybrid work? Because for an entrepreneur to land a client and to, receive that payment, sometimes they feel too responsible to that client. Like, oh my God, they paid me. Like I've got to be there for them 24/7. Well, no, you don't have to. Like you be there when you're fresh and ready with ideas and all this.
Yeah. That's a great question. They didn't pay you.
They didn't pay you.
No, they invested in themselves for an outcome.
Very nice. Better way to say it.
And
yes.
They're responsible for that outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You are not a magical fairy unicorn that is responsible for delivering that outcome. And that is good news for your client, because otherwise, every time they want that outcome, they're going to have to pay you. Instead of learning a system, again, going back to being an entrepreneur, learning a system that they can implement over and over and over again in their lives. And so to answer your question, 2, I work with 2 individual clients, coaching them at a time. Other than that, we have an incredible 12-month program that will give you the tools and the processes in a group coaching setting that is for you to build a business that supports your life. And we have a coaching business accelerator. And so in those spaces, I have lead coaches that support, and I will come in and do group coaching. And other than that, I have my 2 clients, and then I do speaking opportunities like this. And the rest of the time I'm with my family. So having 5 companies, I work on average 10 hours or less per week.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
It's completely possible though, because I've set up the systems for value. And so like last week, I probably worked 4 hours. This week, it's only 3 because buying a house and traveling, and I am going to Austin tomorrow for a friend's album release party. And so next week, maybe I'll work 12. I allow it to be flexible as long as I'm starting with prioritizing my self-care and then my family. And once you put that on a calendar, then that will tell you how much time you truly have left over for business.
Okay. That's interesting. So I have a few questions. People who just aren't entrepreneurs, and then I want to talk about the self-care thing. So how many people have you identified who have come to you and who just aren't entrepreneurs, like who think they might want to be, but they just don't have the stomach for it, or they don't have the mindset for it? Like, do you ever just tell people up front, like, you might be better off just working for someone else? Because I really find a lot of people I meet don't want to be entrepreneurs, or if they've come out of some like company and they think they can do it on their own, but their mindset for risk and stuff like that is just not there.
Well, it's interesting because I had a really great conversation about 2 weeks ago about this. So first, what I want to say is that I truly believe that optimizing your time and your calendar and your productivity, we have the program's called Defy, and we have corporate people go through it. We have military individuals go through it. We have people that work a 9 to 5 go through it. Because at the end of the day, whether you're taking back parts of your life to build a business or you're taking back parts of your life for something else, some other goal, being able to set those boundaries and set those goals and accomplish them is for everybody. Most of my clients are just happen to be able to do that with a business, and that's where their goal is.
That's interesting.
And so 2 weeks ago, I had one of our clients that's in the business coaching accelerator, and she was like, I think I'm just going to go get a job. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And she's like, I'm not great at sales. I said, okay, great. Let's do this. So what's the first?
Dig in.
I know. A therapist. Of course I'm going to.
Well, we're going to get into this. Here we go.
So I hear like the knuckles popping and, like, all right, let's sit down and do this. What's your first step to getting a job? Well, I'm going to have to go online and I'm going to have to find companies that are hiring. And then I'm going to have to apply, and then I'm going to have to do a job interview. And I said, okay. And then what are you going to do in the job interview? Well, I'm going to tell them about my knowledge and my wisdom, and I'm going to hopefully convince them that they want to hire me. I said, okay. You know what that sounds an awful lot like? Prospecting.
Sure, yeah. And something that hasn't changed in 100 years. Yeah.
And she's like, what do you mean? I said, how would you find a client? Well, I've been going online and I've been sending people messages and inviting them into a call. And then you saw the light bulb. It was like, oh, whether you are selling yourself into a job or you are selling a client, a product or an outcome or a service, we're always selling.
Absolutely. Every day. Yeah.
And so the only difference is with a job, you're taking a fraction of that income. She's like, oh.
But here's the thing. I find a lot of people who aren't entrepreneurial, they love to be surrounded by other people who can quote unquote help them, but actually probably most of the time just drag them down.
Well, and it is really...
Is that too cynical? I don't know if that's too cynical. But I find like a lot of people don't like being the lightning rod, where all the good and the bad can come through. Like a lot of people like to be in a group and maybe share the success and share the fault or the blame.
I don't know if I'm going to answer this directly, but I think this idea that a paycheck is safe.
Oh, it's not, but people think it is.
It's so much brainwashing.
Our entire society is brainwashed. The entire Western civilization and capitalism and the way people go through school and accumulate massive debt only to get a job where they'll never pay off their debt. And then they get a mortgage and a car payment, and then they're just debt slaves forever. The whole system's rigged.
Yeah. And as a paycheck, with a paycheck, you're working about 2 days for free.
At least, yeah, because of taxes. Yeah.
So 20% of your life, you're working for no income.
Well, I grew up in Canada, so my brother pays like 53% tax. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wednesday at 2 p.m., he's earning for himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, it's like, okay, times that by your life.
Times that by your life. I like that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when you're like, oh, but I can't afford to not have a paycheck. Well, if you can afford to work for free for half your life, I'm pretty sure you can afford to start a company and not take a paycheck for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. It's just how you package the information and deliver it, isn't it?
And I guess that's easy for me to say because I'm a third-generation entrepreneur and I'm pretty risk-tolerant at this point.
Well, I think that you grew up with parents who were risk-taking. A lot of people just grow up with parents who don't want their kids to take risk. Like I remember I had friends and their parents just wanted them to go from school into a job so they could wipe their hands from parenting and have their kids not cost them any more. And the way to do that is to just make sure that they get a job, good, bad, ugly, whatever, and that they make barely enough money to survive where they don't have to come back to their parents for money in 1 or 3 or 5 years. And instead of teaching them how to be entrepreneurial, teaching them how to use their time, teaching them how to build a network, teaching them how to sell themselves, they just shuffle them in to a 9 to 5 and say, see you later. And I think parents have such a huge role to play in what you do after you're done your basic education.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just rambled on.
No, I was laughing because my dad, you guys get a behind the scenes on this, but my dad called me this morning and he said, do you want to go to Hawaii for a week? And I'm like, is there any other appropriate answer other than yes?
Hell yes.
Right? And he said, well, we can't go to Hawaii without bringing the girls. And he said, it's in May though. They have school. And I was like, uh-huh.
And
now we should be honest in the aspect that I had to have a discussion with my daughter's school board because I took her out of school for approximately a month in October to go to Denver to see the Eagles.
Fair enough.
That's music education. And then we came out here and then we went to Hawaii for 2 weeks and then we came home. And my argument to the school board was, what is she learning? Well, in history, she's learning World War II. Do you know where she was? Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the learning occurs a lot of it outside of the classroom.
But the schools don't want to hear that.
And I think the same is true with jobs.
Yeah.
I think the value is exchanged outside of the office. And
Great.
This is even in organizational psychology. What I have learned is that, psychological safety with teams is not done in cubicles. It's really done outside of the office. It's really done in that human-to-human connection. And people are like, oh, but we can't afford to have people out of the office for a day. I'm like, I think it's less than 40%. It might even be around 20% productivity in a typical employee working in a corporation. I think you can afford to have them out of the office for one day.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking that out of a 5-day work week, they're only working one day.
Which is crazy. And I think a lot of, obviously right now we're dealing with 2024, post-pandemic, and big companies want their staff to come back to work.
Yeah.
And the argument that I've seen played out in the media, and you can let me know if this is what's happening in your ecosystem or not, is that a lot of employers are saying, yeah, you can work from home and get a paycheck, or you can come to the office and get advancement, because you're not going to advance in the company if you're not shoulder to shoulder with the executives, proving to people, showing people that you're around, letting people see your face versus just doing Zooms from Colorado when you're supposed to be working on Wall Street.
Yeah.
So I like, this is kind of the argument that's being played out right now. Like, what would be your response to that?
I think we should be measuring productivity and value. I think we should be living in a value-based, outcome-based society. For a long time in coaching, I told clients that I would take just a fraction of what they earned. I basically took equity deals with my clients because I was that confident in my coaching, and it allowed them to see that it should be based on value and it should be based on outcome, right?
Well, that's quite confident on your side to forego
and that's why I believe that everybody should come to the table with an investment, because I was very confident in my side, but they had nothing to lose.
Yeah, except some equity.
If they didn't make any changes, then
bankrupt.
We both lost.
Right.
And I cannot go into your company. Well, I should say I will not go into your company and make it successful for you, because then you're not learning anything. And when I go away, then you don't have a successful company. That's just not fair.
Right.
So
and you're not a magic genie either. Like, you don't just show up and sit in the office for a few hours a week and then all of a sudden everyone's just perfect or behaving better, right?
I've had this experience where I've shown up and I've sat down, and 20 minutes later, after just the client just vomiting all of these words everywhere, and says, thank you so much for coming. This has been so helpful. And then I politely stand up and leave the office, because I think the container is what's important. And they're focusing that time on the outcome that they desire. I'm the physical representation of this outcome that they said that they wanted. So every time I show up, or we have a session, or we're talking about it, I am a reminder that this is something they said was important to them. And then you get results because you continue to invest in that. And so, to go back to whether or not people are going to be in the office, it's like, I think that corporations are seeing a lack of productivity now from home because there's a lot of other things to do, and because we've had an issue with boundaries and overwhelm and burnout. It's actually working from home what in my ecosphere, in my ecosystem, what it showed is that people were putting in more hours because there was no boundaries.
Yeah, that's true. Like, calls at 8 p.m. because you're at home and you've been at home all day versus leaving the office, turning off your phone and having a life.
So what we've seen from 4 years ago to today in a drop in productivity from remote workers is not due to them not being in the office. It's due to them being burnt out and overwhelmed. And bringing them back in the office is not going to help that.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because like people feel like safe at home. And they feel like it's their four walls and they can control it. And that working in that environment is healthier or safer or more comfortable. Maybe they save on their commute or whatever. But you're right, like this idea of burnout and this lack of boundaries because you just feel like you're home and that's just where you are all the time. And, I might as well be just working all the time as well. And that's crazy because you shouldn't be working at 9 p.m. at night if you're in the same time zone as your company and as your boss and everything like that, I suppose.
And is it safe? Because now you don't have this space that you go to that your mind's like, oh, this is work. It's just all one.
But as an entrepreneur, don't you think like, okay, so now we're switching back. Like we went from a salaried worker who maybe needs that differentiation between a workspace and a home space. But if you're an entrepreneur, I also feel like you're kind of, you take the company with you everywhere you go. And maybe there's maybe a little bit lack of boundaries because you are the company.
I have rituals to start and end my entrepreneurial day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that helps me keep the energy clean. And I've built a company that I can be me no matter where I am. Right. So the things that I don't want to be doing in my company, I've outsourced or delegated or honestly just eliminated. And so I get to be me no matter if I'm on an airplane or if I'm having podcast conversation with you or if I'm coaching a client or if I'm on the beach with my kids. I get to be me. I get to bring that 100% value, right? And so that's great for me as well as for my mind sitting in front of a computer. I don't just go from nursing my kid to stepping onto the computer. That's not fair to my brain. I don't just go from like being deep in a coaching session to working with my daughter on homework. That's not fair.
How do you bridge those? How do you buffer that mental space?
Music, smell, and movement, and breath. And I have my own ritual that I go through. But even in our coaching programs, we teach this because before you take a shower, you're doing some kind of non-conscious ritual. In the shower, you're doing some kind of non-conscious ritual. You're not consciously going through it, but you're primed to go through this. And so the more that we can create these non-conscious rituals, the more aligned and present we are in that moment. And the healthier it is for our brain. And that's why it's like you should have some time when you're walking to not be stimulated, listening to a podcast, listening to music. You should have some time to just have some dead quiet because that's restoring your physical health. And to be depleting your mental battery while trying to restore your physical battery, it's sending a whole bunch of different signals. And we're so overstimulated. Like that's a whole nother podcast as far as the whole overstimulated.
100%.
So I like to let my brain know what gears we're shifting into.
Well, that's nice. Yeah. That's very...
Keep the transmission clean.
That's interesting. I want to walk you through something, given your therapy background and stuff like this. So I made adventure television shows. I traveled all around the world. Sometimes, some years it was like 300 days on the road, etc. Loved it. Entrepreneur. I was a TV personality producer. Ran my own production company. So had a lot of people working for me and stuff like that. But I had never felt healthier in my whole life than I think in 2019, where I made like 10 episodes of TV and did 42 speaking events. But I was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks I was out in nature, sleeping in a tent, walking 10 miles a day, sleeping and waking with the rhythms of the earth, no cell phone signal, no nothing. And then coming out of that, climbing a mountain or walking across a desert, and then coming out of that back into the real world, working with my team, doing a few speaking engagements, and then going back into production, living in a tent, hiking in nature, exercising, eating healthy, the whole thing. and I've never felt better in my life. And it's because I had those rituals where I was shifting gears between, the filming was never really stressful. It was fun, but we were able to disconnect from society. And I think that disconnection from society was one of the healthiest things in the world. And one of the things I talk about a lot in the podcast and in life, is the connection with nature and being able to get out and how it like heals you and rejuvenates you and stuff like that. And we don't get enough time to hike and trek and all this kind of stuff in our society today. But it's very funny that you have these little sequences that you do in between in order to like have that break. And I was very much the same, but I would do like 2 weeks and then come back to the world for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Even like, so for the way I've designed our weeks and our coaching program is 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Okay. So yeah.
Because I think that you need that implementation time. I think if you're constantly getting stimulation and learning, then you're just going to be overwhelmed and overloaded, and there's no time to actually rest and implement.
Reflect. Like if there's no time to reflect, nothing sinks in, right? Because you're just consuming more information.
Yeah.
And you don't have a time to sit with it.
Yeah. So here's a great like thought process to take with you. What's the difference between speed and velocity?
Speed is a measurement of something going from A to B, and velocity is what? Is it? Lost.
And I have to give one of my friends, Lonnie, credit for this. And so speed is how fast something's going.
Right.
Velocity is its progress towards a target.
Oh, okay. So the target being the operative distinction between the two things.
So which one do you want to choose, speed or velocity?
Velocity. I want to be moving towards a target, have some kind of goal in mind.
And what you just said is that your 2 weeks of doing nothing increased your velocity.
Oh, 1,000%. But we were also being useful when we were out there too.
Yeah, but what wouldn't the argument be to spend all 4 weeks going? To be fast? No.
No, not at all. Yeah.
No. And so
that's where you get burned. That's how you get burned out.
So sometimes the best thing that you can do to make progress is nothing.
Yeah.
Is rest, is relax, is, restore.
Yeah.
And we are human beings, not human doings. And I think that we forget that.
Where do you go to rest, recover, and absorb? Like, are you able to do that in the environment of your home with your family, or do you have places that you like to go, like out in nature? Or...
I have 3 places.
There we go. Here we go.
In order. The beach.
The beach. Oh, the water is so healing, isn't it?
Yes. I am definitely part mermaid. So.
Do you run in slow motion?
I don't.
Sorry, another Baywatch. Sorry.
I don't know that I would be okay running right now on the beach. I'm still in like postpartum recovery.
Running on the beach is terrible for you. Like,
really?
because your joints, like walking on sand is hard. Running on sand is also really hard. Like you think it's soft, but what it's doing to your hips and your knees and because you're not really hitting and pushing off. You're hitting and sliding.
Huh.
And it can be quite hard on the joints. Even though it's soft on the heel, better than concrete, you're not getting like a clean push to the next step. So it can be really hard.
I'm learning stuff because I always thought like volleyball players retired from court volleyball to sand volleyball because it was easier.
I think volleyball is a little bit different because it's mostly just jumping up and down versus pushing yourself through like the way like a runner or a sprinter would do it.
Well, we learned something today. So yes.
I'm not a physiotherapist, by the way, or a doctor.
Do you play one on TV?
I do.
You are like one of the only people I can make this joke with. So there we go.
There we go.
We need to like cue a cymbal sound for the editor there.
Yeah. Okay, so the beach is one of your favorite places.
Beach, ranch
with horses
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So horses are giant neurobiofeedback machines, and so leave my phone in the car, no AirPods, nothing. AirPods are actually pretty terrible for you. But anyway, I digress. So everything stays in the car, and my family knows I'm at the ranch, so they don't think I'm dying. And talk to the horses. Sometimes I'm just there for hours and I say nothing. And it's so assaulting when I get back in the car and like there's music or a podcast on or something like
or
that.
1,000 messages that you have to look at.
That doesn't happen anymore. Like I don't, when you sent the email and it had your phone number in it, I was like, I'm not calling because nobody has my cell phone number, and I love that.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that. So I did use my phone to email you, but
I appreciate the basic levels of communication. Yeah, but no,
you've missed the carrier pigeon. The carrier pigeon.
I'm watching Game of Thrones right now. So many carrier pigeons.
So I'm like so out of it.
Really?
I really am. I only watched the end of The Crown because it was historically relevant.
Significant.
So, yeah. I'll watch documentaries. Is Game of Thrones a documentary?
No, it's a scripted fictional experience, but it's pretty magical. We're very well produced and stuff. So if you're gonna, we're going on a tangent, but
I'm gonna binge.
If you're gonna binge, this is probably one of the highest quality things you could watch.
Okay. All right. I'll make a note. If I go back to the dark side, Game of Thrones, and then if you don't see me for months, it's your fault.
Okay, I'll take that heat.
How many episodes are there?
It's like 8 seasons.
Absolutely.
It's a lot.
Because 8 seasons times, let's say, 10 episodes.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, so that's 80 hours times 8. What's the math? 640 hours of my life? No,
you can't do it.
Nope.
No. So one of my routines is I like to wind down in the evening and turn my brain off, and one of the ways I do that is by watching these stories and content and stuff like that. So
is that turning your brain off?
I think it is. It really. Again, we were still on your 3 happy places.
Oh, the bath.
But
the third one's the bath, and I put Epsom salt in it, so it's basically the ocean. It's just warmer. Okay, there you go.
Okay,
so,
great.
Was it worth the wait?
It was worth the wait.
Okay,
Thank you. But for me, I found I sleep a lot better at night when I don't work into the evening, and I have like a cutoff time, and then I just chill out and watch some fantasy experience, and I'm just kind of taken into a different world. And there's people there, living their lives, and and again, it has to be well made because I make content too. So I see all the shit that's done badly, and it drives me crazy.
I'm never watching TV with you because if I watch a movie with my husband because he's a stuntman, he just critiques everything.
He would like one of my shows, maybe. Maybe I can get him to.
He's probably seen them. I have it.
Maybe it's true. Yeah, some rock climbing, some hiking, some fun stuff.
The rock climbing, we'll see, because he doesn't have a good relationship with rappelling.
That's true. So how often do you get into those 3 happy spaces? Like, how do you?
Daily.
Wow.
It's one of the reasons I moved back to California.
Be closer to the ocean.
Virginia has a beach. It's not the same.
Not the same. No,
it is.
It's cold.
No, the Pacific's colder than the Atlantic.
Really? I don't know anything about oceans.
Yes, I believe. Again, all the comments are you're welcome for all of this engagement with this episode.
People are going to be cutting this up for years.
It's totally fine.
Yeah.
I believe that the Pacific coast off the coast of California is colder than the coast of the Atlantic Ocean.
And that's water temperature, not air temperature.
Water temperature.
Yeah.
Yes. You would be correct, I think, with air temperature, though.
Right. Yeah. I think, because Southern California is much warmer. Yeah. Virginia's cold. Yeah. You guys get like a proper winter.
I mean, compared to Canada?
Well, Canada's terrible. I don't live in Canada anymore.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's
taxes and winter?
We get inches of snow, not feet. That's, yes. So, taxes, winter. I just caught up with that.
Yeah.
But so daily. I think it's really important daily. And, the more I put on myself, the more time I spend there. It is definitely proportionate.
How important do you think having a relationship with animals is to finding like a balance or mental health? Because I can tell you, I went for decades without animals, and I picked up a couple cats during COVID, and they've been incredibly like calming and soothing. And my relationship with them sounds like the way you describe your relationship with your horses.
Yes, and remember, I have a service dog too.
That's right. Yes,
so
of course.
I spend a lot of time with animals, and I think the more humans that I meet, the more animals that I like.
That's the way it's all going, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that not specifically, I can only speak to canines and equines, right? And so a canine is a predator animal. Its brain is driven the same way as a human. When I'm spending time with the equines, though, their brain is different.
Because they don't hunt.
Their motivation, the why they do something, is for peace. So when you're riding a horse and you're putting pressure on them to turn right or turn left, the pressure gives them a cue on where to go, and the release tells them they did something right.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Whereas as a human, we just move the needle. we'll do it for another hot dog, another hot dog, another hot dog. Dogs too. We'll do it for another hot dog. And so ours is like constant stimulation to let us know that we did something right. Whereas a horse is the reprieve and the peace. And they're so like, we could do an entire episode on that because there's such a great lesson in the reward being the peace, the reward being the stillness, the reward being the nothing.
Yeah, that's it. That's the value.
And so I have spent my entire life with horses, and I feel so blessed and lucky to have that experience. And they're the greatest teachers, even more so than my dogs. And I think the loyalty with my dogs are Great Danes. The loyalty that I've experienced with them is just tremendous. And again, I think if more people treated each other with that sense of loyalty and commitment and unconditional love, not that there's a whole lot of humans that maybe deserve it, but also maybe everybody deserves it. So
Everyone deserves to try it, maybe.
I'm just on this floating rock with you, and I don't know that any of this is going to make sense, but at the end of the day, those are the things that I lay in bed at night when I'm not watching TV. I am just thinking about that and thinking about, well, how can I make this world better? And how can I spend the breath that I'm given, the heartbeats that I'm given, being diagnosed with 2 heart conditions at a young age, and having been told by doctors that, I shouldn't actually be here. I'm convinced I'm here for a reason. And so I'm like, well, how can I bring more of that to the world? And so you talked about coaches and mentors, not that horses are not gigantic investments. Nature and animals are relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
And what can we learn from that? The other, again, this is on the subject of inefficiency, but there's no inefficiency in nature. None.
It's beautiful.
Everything has a purpose and a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And what can you learn from that? And so I sound like I'm high constantly sometimes because I'm just talking about the seasons and the moon and all of this kind of stuff and how it applies to business. And even working within the rhythms and the cycles that nature has, humans should as well.
Yeah, I mean, I take business leaders and high net worth people out into the mountains and give them a week of solitude and hiking with me and just long talks and evening sunsets and help them find some inner peace. And that's where I find my spirituality is out in nature, and that's where I find my connection. Yeah.
And I think that is so incredible. I think we are supposed to spend more time in nature and with animals. And I think it positively impacts a lot of allergies. And then, forest bathing, here's proof that we're supposed to be in nature. Like, these trees give off this, I think it's a pheromone that protects them from bugs.
Right. Yeah. And it also affects us.
When we breathe it, it increases our immune systems.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like a no-brainer.
Like, we're supposed to be in nature. We're supposed to have this relationship.
And we're cutting the trees down and destroying it all.
Wow. I don't know that we can go there in this podcast yet. I don't know that we have time for that. And I do think that we're supposed to be able to recharge in nature. And I think it's also our responsibility to help nature recharge too.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, look, I know you have your husband and your child waiting. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yes, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So we tripping through the first part of the podcast on my experience in China, but we'll go forward from here.
The Bonnie and Clyde is the only thing I'm going to remember from this, by the way.
You just fast forward to like 18 minutes in, and then it's a solid episode.
Solid. No, but without having that background knowledge, then people don't really know you. Like those quirky things are the bits and pieces that people can hold on to while they ride through the rest of your, biography and the rest of your experiences. Yeah. And those are the things that people will remember and think, oh, yeah, she did time in China. She was a stuntwoman. That's wild.
There's a ton of quirkiness all over my social media. So if the quirkiness continues. It didn't stop when I stopped doing stunts. I guarantee it. So
that's good. You're still living.
I am still absolutely living and out there, talking to horses and doing horse therapy and all of that. So yeah.
Beautiful. So now we'll go to that one where we got the double. Thank you so much for swinging by. Beautiful to meet you.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to continue this conversation offline.
I hope so.
Yes.